Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petite to Queen's Claim Your Career Crown podcast. I'm your host, Lynn, and today I'm joined by our special guest, Jill D. Griffin. And we are going to have a really great conversation today. I just know it. We're going to be talking about how to create work-life balance while living with an invisible or non-apparent disability. And I have to say this is very near and dear to my heart because of one of my dear friends. So I am so glad to have Jill here on the show, and I want to tell you a little bit about Jill because first of all, she's a career strategist and executive coach. She's spoken at Adweek, the Digital Media Summit, She Knows Media event, and she has given talks to the marketing team of the New York Times, Hearst, and Condé Nast. And as I go through my notes here, pardon me if I have to look down, Jill was a founding member of the 212 Digital Advertising Club and was honored as a visionary at the 10-year mark. Congratulations. She has been listed as Advertising Agent's 25 Women to Watch. She's won Adweek's Media Planner of the Year twice, and she has been shortlisted at the the Cannes Media Festival. I am really excited about everything Jill does. She's also the host of the Career Refresh podcast and is an executive career and Gallup certified strengths coach. She has over 25 years of experience coaching and building company cultures. Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm really glad to be here to have this conversation today.
I think this is such an important topic, and I'm really glad that we're going to be talking about everything that we're going to cover. And for anyone who's joining us for that very first time, don't miss out on a single episode by subscribing to Claim Your Career Crown wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you love what we're doing and love the show, please share the love and give us a 5-star review. All right, so Jill, let's sort of go do some more background and really learn and share with our audience your journey to becoming a career strategist and executive coach.
Okay, so we're going to go back about 20 or so years, just as my own personal career was taking off, getting promotion, doing well. And right around that time, I took a solo trip to Australia. And while I was on my trip to Australia, I was in an accident that resulted in a traumatic brain injury. And basically, it was classified as a TBI, traumatic brain injury. But with many brain injuries, they're insidious, and we don't always know when it first happens all the glory of what the new reality is. So come back to the States, continuing to work, but was finding that I was having so many challenges figuring out what was a volatile work environment, like velocity of business, what was my own ego as I'm trying to, do good and make a name for myself within my organization, or what was actual cognitive impairment. And it became so stressful to me that I wasn't getting answers from medical professionals. Again, 20 years ago, very different today, what we know about TBI and traumatic brain injury, that I, yes, was still working with doctors and professionals, but really went out to do my own study. And I knew that I wasn't going to go to med school, but I started to study. I started to notice that there were things in my environment or with when I was eating that would trigger my symptoms above the baseline. So I really dug into studying functional nutrition, functional medicine. And then as a result of that, when you look at functional nutrition, it's anatomy, physiology, where it meets food. And food is everything from the physical environment to what you're putting in your mouth. And through that course of studying, understanding about mindset, cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, studying all that, realizing that I could use some of those tools to work within my new invisible disability. I can't go back and fix the fact that I have a head injury and I literally broke things. But how can I now use positive mindset to work within the environment that I'm in? So cut scene, I now bring it back into the office. I'm getting promoted. My team is doing well. HR is saying, like, what are you doing? Because everybody keeps asking and wants to work on your team. And my office ends up being like the little homestead where people would come out and be like, can I just hang out in your office during the day? And it just was watching what I created for myself personally. My executive leadership knew that I was, at this point, I was a coach in addition to being a marketing strategist. And they were like, go, like two for the price of one. Like people want, you want to use this to help people perform and they're open to it. Great. And just really seeing overall productivity, revenue, delivering on goals and objectives of whatever the business was at hand, and just seeing across the board, all of it improve. I did that until 2017, in which I just got to a point where I loved my career. I loved so many parts of it, but I also got to the point where I was like, okay, what's next for me? So at that point, went on my own as both a consultant and a coach, and have been on my own now for just about 5 years, running my own career strategy, executive coaching, and consultancy. So that's how I got here.
Wow. Wow, that's quite the story, and definitely a lot to overcome in the sense of, and how you approached it was incredible. So let's sort of talk about this a little bit more. How can having an invisible and or non-apparent disability affect your career? I mean, you told us a little bit about how it affected your personal career. How can it affect others?
Yeah, so I think what it comes down to is, like, if I just put it through my own experience, because if you look at me, you don't see a disability.
Yeah.
So you may forget that I have something. So even if I've told you, if I choose to disclose, right, the onus is on me to disclose. The onus is never on the company to pry. But if I choose to disclose, you're human. Humans are messy. You may not remember. So now I'm in a situation where if I have a non apparent or invisible disability, I have to constantly remind you. And then what happens from that, often, again, I'm speaking for myself and many people I've spoken to, obviously this doesn't fit for everyone, but what starts to happen when it's not apparent or invisible is you start to feel like you're complaining because you have to
Yeah.
constantly remind people, hey, I can't, I know we're all having the employee outing on the boat, but I can't go on the boat. Or I need my workstation to be closer to the bathroom because I have a digestive disorder and I might need to make, and I'm not saying that you're disclosing this to your hiring manager or boss, but if you choose to disclose through HR channels, if that's been made available to you, um, those accommodations. I mean, I know for myself very often, um, I was either working near a light that was a fluorescent light that was constantly blinking, which to somebody is just annoying, but to me, it could actually put me into some sort of episode. But I'm not allowed to fix it myself because of union rules and buildings. I can't actually stand on my desk and just tweak it, right? But I have to constantly say, like, this is a problem. Or other times, my workstation being situated near a hallway or a pathway, we're having a constant perpetual movement near my eyes, where I would go to stand up and I would fall over. Um, Many employees and fellow colleagues have told me only recently that they thought I was drinking on the job. So there's a lot of judgment that can come up
Yeah.
with it, right? Because at times I slur my speech. That still happens today. At times I know what I want to say, but I lose language. That still can happen today. So if you don't know that necessarily that there is a challenge or an issue, there's a lot of, I mean, again, people are human. They're messy. They may judge and be like, what's up with her? Why is she behaving this way? So when a company can, in all of my years of working, and there's a chance that I could be wrong, but in my experience, I never once saw in an employee handbook or in any HR training. And as I held officer level titles, C-suite titles, and executive level titles, I was also never trained as an executive working for publicly traded companies that invisible disabilities or non-apparent disabilities are real. We were trained on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We were trained on, racism and sexism, but we never talked about ageism, which, by the way, is part of inclusion. And so with disability, right, it was just like never discussed. And if we don't discuss it, people don't know what they don't know. So again,
Yeah.
it's my choice to disclose it. It's not the onus of the company to know it, but life would have been easier for myself and many others if there was a glide path, if there was an easy way for me to let HR know that I can work. I need some environmental adjustments. My desk or my workstation needs to be in a certain part of the floor. That every time the department rotated, right, you get new hires, you need to reshuffle the seats. So I was constantly having to have same conversations, right? That's what I'm talking about, where often what happens to the person who has the disability, they're feeling like they're a burden, or they're feeling like, oh, I have to let people know again. They're feeling maybe ashamed or self-conscious. And all of this has an impact on how you perform. So it's not
Yeah.
just the velocity of business and how you show at work, but because you're having this other challenge, mental or physical, you're now having to constantly sort of complain or tell people. And it's just a really simple thing. I think that we can, when we're creating cultures of inclusion, and I know that everyone is highly concerned and it's overdue and much needed to be creating cultures of inclusion, we can also be thinking about this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because there's all kinds of different things. People have migraines. I mean, it's very common.
Fibromyalgia, depression,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
anybody who has social anxiety,
Yeah.
any of that, again, may not represent visually.
Yeah. Some people can't deal with large groups or crowds. Even, and that could be what we would think of just a small gathering of a team meeting, all crammed into a conference room could, be very disturbing to someone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is really,
And even something as simple as like, I'm a New Yorker, and living in New York, I have so many former friends and colleagues that come from various cultures and various food related backgrounds. And based on either religious beliefs or cultural beliefs, there may be food that you don't consume, right? So this is
right.
not a disability, but something as simple for inclusion as company is planning an outing, or company is planning some sort of event or celebration, like, oh, we'll get everybody pizzas to celebrate. But over the years, I mean, there was foods that I couldn't eat because they would create inflammation in my brain. But watching my kosher colleague also say, like, okay, I guess I just don't, I don't get to participate. So I think inclusion, we need to be thinking about, if we're creating a culture of inclusion, there's really easy ways of preparing for this and making sure that you're doing the best that you can to make people really feel like they're part of the team, and that would help them greatly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I concur on every level. So, you touched on some of these things. So I think it'd be worth a deep dive a little bit more. But that people who do have an invisible or non-apparent disability, how can they better manage their careers?
Yeah, it's a really important question that needs to be decided on the individual level, right? So
Yeah.
this is how I did it, and how I help a lot of my clients. My clients are a mixture of people who have non-apparent disabilities, but also other challenges that may not necessarily be classified as a disability. Just a challenge within the workplace, or a conflict with your boss, right? So when you're thinking about how you want to approach, you have to first decide what your non-negotiables are, right? So
Right.
for me, making sure sleep, exercise, and proper nutrition, if I didn't have those three things on a regular basis, I could not show up and do the work that was expected of me. So you have to get clear in that. You also have to decide if you want to disclose.
Yeah.
That wasn't an option through a formal method for me through my personal career, but other people, I mean, if you work in a smaller company, it may become obvious, or they may not be prepared for it. I always worked in large companies. Where I did disclose is when I had what I felt were allies. I had a couple of supervisors and executive leadership that were just phenomenal, and felt very comfortable exposing to them. And it was always around a situation like, we're going to do that business trip, but there's certain parts of the business trip that I just want you to know in advance. I'm not asking for special accommodation, but I'm going to need to do this instead. And then being like, oh my God, of course I'm giving you special accommodation, right? So you have to decide your non-negotiables. You have to decide if you're going to disclose. If you choose to not disclose, that's your right. There's never a time in which you have to tell somebody. Early on in my career, when I disclosed, I was fired from it. I was told that I couldn't perform the duties, which today, 20 years later, I mean, it was illegal then. It would never happen today. I'm totally confident of that. But we regularly were expected to entertain clients, and the president wanted everybody to go out on her yacht, and I couldn't. So
Yeah.
I was told that I wasn't a team player. And she's right. I mean, we could talk about the moral and ethics of it, but that doesn't serve me, right? So for me, it was like, where is she right? And she was right because I wasn't able to perform aspects of the job. So that's how I was able to work through it and be like, you know what, it's fine. I mean, again, I don't believe any of that would happen today, but 20 years ago, I mean, the
Yeah, well,
world is
I bet you anything. Some of her clients didn't want to go out on a yacht to, you know, sometimes, you do those types of harbor tours or whatever, and it's like I just like, how when do we get to the dock so I can get off this thing?
I mean,
You know,
totally.
you know, and it's like you could have been responsible for the onshore entertainment, that for the people who didn't want to go out on the stupid boat.
Or you go out for 2 hours and we'll meet you for the meal back at the club or the restaurant
Yeah,
or whatever,
yeah,
right?
and you could
And
be organizing that, and to your point, there's some people who wouldn't want to go out on the boat for various reasons, just
totally.
some people don't like to be on the water, okay?
I also don't know that I wanted the president of my department to be the one that was driving the boat.
Yeah, that there's that too. Now, and granted, I do like being out on the water and things like that, but I will say that when I've done those sort of harbor things, I'm often, after a certain point, I'm going like, when the heck are we going to dock?
Right.
I just want off, and you're trapped like a rat, you know?
And you don't have to have a vestibular situation to feel seasick. But you
Yeah,
just like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
anyway, so again, you need to know your non-negotiables. You need to decide if you're going to disclose. If you disclose, again, I would get clear in the employee handbook, or I would ask HR, what is the policy? And then what really happens then is that in talking to HR professionals today, they would make it clear, either with building management or however, every organization is going to be set up differently, but what your needs are. So if you need to have a workstation that's set up a certain way, and then in a working from home environment, perhaps you need help with certain lighting, or you need a screen that's a certain height, like whatever it is that you need. In my own research, I have found that only about 10% of professionals choose to disclose because of ramifications.
yeah.
And most people with visible and invisible disabilities actually, in the end, choose to work for themselves so they can have more control over their environment. And again, that is a personal choice. But I think if we go back to the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are missing out on the diversity of thinking, the diversity of experiences, the inclusion, by basically saying, like, there's an entire set of people that don't fit into how we know how to work with them, and it's too hard or too messy, so we end up inadvertently excluding them. And I just think it's such a miss for any company to not be thinking about how they can create a future that is more inclusive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is really a really good segue, because you've already touched on how employers can really support their team members in their working environments, the culture, and really accommodate all forms of inclusion and diversity, including people with the invisible or non-apparent disabilities. And so you've touched on a number of things that really make sense on that. And I think that one thing that also is that when you open your paradigm, so let's go back to the boat person.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you could see, like, okay, well, just because, my employee can't, this team member can't do this. Well, what about some of our clients who may not want to be doing this? Like, take off your own blinders. And just because you love it and you're passionate about it, and I have to say it's probably tied up with some ego of showing off
Or
this
it,
boat. At the same time, some people that isn't, they're still great clients, but you want to create the same thing. It's like, that diversity of thought and that experience can actually help you provide better service and a better client experience. I'm just sort of talking off the cuff here, but I mean, that's one of the most brilliant things about that, bringing in that range of diversity of thought, because people will view things from a different perspective or angle that has not even occurred to you. And when you create that openness, you're going to be able to identify potentially some risk that you would not even have seen, of how you could be turning off a whole bunch of people, or just completely, in this case, missing the boat.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it comes back to we all have an internal bias, which is usually
Yeah.
skewed negative, right? We think like, well, who wouldn't want to spend a lovely evening in New York Harbor? And as we just stated, I can find quite a few people that also may have nothing to do with a vestibular issue. Might be like the idea of being on a boat with 20 people is the last thing I'd want to do. I'd rather sit in a restaurant or, do maybe some sort of other, fitness related activity, which is something that's, been more and more common again pre-pandemic, but everybody's going a soul cycle together or doing some sort of other environment. And then there's going to be people that doesn't work for. But I think when we think about planning and get out of our own bias and consult people that are not just like us, not being either not reporting to us or right on our team, and we're getting a diversity of thought, we're able to build a environment and experience that is going to work for more people. And then the end is that if more people feel included, then they're going to be weighing in and participating. And the reason for half these things is about team building or client service, and that's what you want.
Right, right. Absolutely. So, let's talk a little bit about the, work-life balance, and how important this is for everyone, but also in some cases, especially so for people with invisible or non-apparent disabilities. And what are some ways that they can manage this work-life balance better?
Yeah, that approach for me is what I call the three C's, and it is clarity, confidence, and certainty. So the clarity comes into, as I stated before, your non-negotiables. What makes sense for you? I hear this also, um, even if again you're not in a situation where you'd be classified as having a visible or invisible disability, it could just be what works for your life and what you want your career and your life to look like. So maybe that means you're leaving work at a certain time each day, or you're thinking about how are you weaving in, you know, I'm child free, but I have worked with many amazing mothers over the years, and I've watched them leave work at 5 p.m. Um, do family duties and be with their children and then jump back online at 9 p.m. And what I'm hearing from clients, and I've worked with hundreds of clients privately at this point, what I'm hearing from clients is no. When I shut down now at 5 or 6 p.m., depending on the culture and the job that I've signed up for, I'm spending the rest of the evening with my family, right? So that's what I mean by getting your non-negotiables. That is the balance of what you need to decide for yourself. And again, you're not doing it through a lens of anger or dropping a boundary that you're like, just letting you know that I'm not working past a certain time. It's like, no, it's like when you're really clear, then often you're just operating that way and you're able to create the result that you want. Not always, right? This is why we work with coaches. This is why we need mentors. This is why we sometimes need therapists, right? All of those are great professionals to have around you. But the idea that clarity is going to help you understand. And then where it's also appropriate, I would also check with your colleagues. Meaning someone else might be like, I'm a morning person, not a late person. I understand that not all businesses can function this way. My point is when we start getting clarity on what we each need, as humans who are compassionate, we can start making accommodations for each other and have a greater harmony within our workplace, even if we're working from home. So that clarity is important. The second part is around certainty, and that is really getting clear that the only thing in life that is certain is your thoughts. So choose them wisely. And if you're having pretty crummy thoughts around your situation, again, you want to either work with a therapist or a coach to figure out for yourself what is it that is going on here? What are some of the beliefs that you have? Are those true? Is that a fact, or is it just sort of your orientation? Again, we all have a negative bias, and get clear in that so that you're really clear on the thoughts that are working for you, because your thoughts are going to create a feeling inside you, and then from that feeling, you're going to take action, and from that action, you're going to have a result. So you want to be thinking about, like I always say, like this is a multi-million dollar machine, my head. What am I putting in this brain to make sure that I'm performing and showing up in various different ways? So I want to be really clean, not only what I put in my body from a eating standpoint, but what I put in my mind. So certainty also for what I tell many clients is be really specific about what you're consuming from a media standpoint. Don't really think about, do you want to start your day with news? Do you want the world and the news outlets to tell you what your day is going to be? Or do you want to take a couple of quiet moments, whether that's meditation, whether that's just exercise, quiet, making a cup of tea in your kitchen, like whatever that quiet time is for you, you thinking about how you can create certainty for yourself before you start the day. I always want to put the good in before I then look at what's going on in the world. I used to spend mornings that wouldn't necessarily be national or international news, but I would be reading all the trades to know what would be happening and what was going on with the stock market, right? Same thing. It's like, do I need to do that first, or where can I create certainty? And we create certainty based on facts. And then lastly is the confidence, and that's the idea that there's two ways of looking at confidence. There's self-confidence and there's confidence. Confidence, in my opinion, is about, I've done this before, therefore I know I can do it again. So when I'm posed with a challenge, or I'm posed with how do I balance a work-life balance, I can think about, okay, if this worked before or this didn't work before, so how do I want to do it again? And that action of repeated behavioral shifts is what creates confidence. What creates self-confidence, which is very important distinction in my opinion, is the ability to work through any emotion and get through the other side. So I'm not saying it's going to be fun. It might suck, but I know that when I feel anxiety, that is just, right? That is just the primitive brain in the back shooting out signals and neurochemicals into my body, and I can get through that. It's going to dissipate. It might swell back up, but it's going to dissipate. So learning how to pay attention to the emotions that are coming on in our body. We may need to physically move. We may need exercise. We may need to walk around the block. We may need to literally pat ourselves. And it's really coming down to, there's the stressor, the flaming email from the client, and there's the stress, right? Which, sorry, I said that wrong. The stress is the flaming email from the client. The stressor is the physical response in your body. And you have to let that out. So when you know that you can get through that situation, that's what creates self-confidence. So at this point where I am, having done mindset and thought work and meditative work for 20 plus years at this point, I'm kind of like, there's nothing that I'm afraid of in the long term. That doesn't mean I don't have fear. Of course I have fear. I don't want to experience the yuckiness of things. I don't want to fail publicly or do any of those things. I get that. That can be triggering to you. But I know if I do fail, I have the tools to get through it. I know if I fall on my face, literally or figuratively, I can get through it. I know if I launch a product or offer a service and it doesn't turn out well, I can get through it. So
Yeah.
that construct of getting clarity on your non-negotiables, being really clear about what you want to think, and creating certainty for yourself, which only comes from your thoughts. And then lastly, knowing that feelings are feelings. They're kind of harmless. They don't feel harmless. They're neurochemicals. They can feel really scary and be really anxiety provoking. But if you need to, working with a professional like a therapist, or depending on the severity of it, with a coach, you can get through those things. And that's what's going to create confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I concur. And that is such tremendous mindset work that you can do not only for your own personal um, growth, but also how it's going to truly serve you in your professional life. So, Jill, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with your own traumatic head injury, and how others with invisible or non-apparent disabilities can ensure they have and create that work-life balance for themselves. I know that our listeners are going to want to know more about you and where they can find you.
Ah, great. Thank you. You can go to my website at Jill Griffin Coaching, or you can catch me for daily inspiration on Instagram at Jill Griffin Official.
All right, that's wonderful. And we'll make sure that those links are included below, so they're just a single click away. And this has been such an important discussion. I'm so glad we had that today, and we're able to review all of this wonderful information. For those of you who joined us, thank you so much. We love hearing from you. So if you have ideas like you'd like to share, you can leave a comment down below. And also, if you would like to suggest a topic or you have a question, you can email us at jointheconversation@petitetoqueen.com. And of course, to stay current on all of our insightful advice, our breakthrough advantages, and incredible episodes like the one today with Jill, you can sign up for our weekly Wisdoms newsletter at petitetoqueen.com. And thank you again for tuning in. And Jill, thank you. Thank you so much for this incredible, incredible discussion.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you making the space for me. I appreciate it.